Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video, I'm going to give you a lot of information about using guides in Adobe Illustrator. Now, when I very first started using guides, I used them in a pretty limited capacity because I didn't realize just how useful they could be. So my goal is to show you what I've learned and allow you to maximize their usefulness because they can really speed up your work process and they can help you be more precise, which is going to make your work look better when you're working on a project. So first, let's go over the basics. Most guides come from the rulers on the edge of your workspace. Well, I don't see any rulers here. That's because I have to turn them on. Now, with nothing selected on my artboard, I can come over to the Properties panel, and here in the Ruler and Grids area, I can click on this first icon, and now I have rulers along the top and the left side of my workspace. I can also turn those on by coming up to View, come down to rulers, and this would actually say show rulers if I didn't have the rulers on, and I could turn them on there. And then of course what I would use is the keyboard shortcut Command R. Now we can get a little fancy with our guides as well. Let's come up to Illustrator and come down to Preferences and choose Guides and Grid. And here we can change the color and the style of our guides. The default setting is cyan, and I really like this color because it works with most of my projects really well. But if you want to try some other colors, you can click on one of these or click on Custom and choose any color that you want. You can also use either lines or dots. Sometimes I find the dots are hard to see, so I'm just going to leave this on lines and come down here and say OK. Now let's move to a blank document, and I'll show you how I very first learned to make a guide, and that's by going to one of the rulers, clicking on the ruler with my mouse, and dragging the guide down onto the artboard. You drag from the top ruler to create a horizontal guide, and you drag from the left ruler to create a vertical guide. But the whole point of having guides is to help with our accuracy. So just dragging a guide randomly onto the artboard is probably not going to be very helpful. So I'm going to select these guides and press the delete key. And this time when I drag out a guide, I'm going to hold the shift key down. This gives me the ability to snap my guide on any one of these little tick marks on my upper ruler. Now, if you look closely at the ruler, you can see I have a little dotted line that's following along when I move my cursor, and it helps me know where I am. When I get to the 8-inch mark, I'm going to release my mouse and my guide is perfectly placed. Just know that holding this shift key down is only going to work when you're dragging out a new guide. Now, I recently learned what's become my favorite way for creating guides, and that's to simply double-click on the ruler. For a vertical guide, I'm going to come up to the top ruler, and I'm going to try to make one right here on this 3-inch mark. I'll just double-click, and there's my guide. Let me come over to the 12-inch mark, and I'll double-click, and here I have a guide at the 12-inch marker. If I want to make a horizontal line, I come to the left ruler. Let's click on the 2-inch mark and the 8-inch mark, and I just think that's a little bit faster. Now, many times the precision is really going to be important, and so even when I was double clicking right on the line, I may have missed that mark slightly, but there is a way to go back and make sure that I get the guides exactly where I want them, and that's to use the XY coordinate values of those guides after they're on the artboard. And if that brings up some bad memories from junior high algebra, well, don't worry, because all we need to know is that the top ruler represents the x-axis and the left ruler represents the y-axis. So any of the guides that cross the top or the x-axis, if we select these and we come over to the Properties panel and look here at the X value, it's going to tell us exactly where it is. Well, I didn't quite make the 3-inch mark, so all I do is highlight that number and type in 3 and press return. And I can do that for all of these guides which I created, and it's really quite fast. Now for my horizontal guides, they intersect with the y-axis. So as I select this guide, I come to the y value in the Properties panel, and I'm going to type a 2 here and press Return, and let's select this one here and check the y value here. It needs to be at 8, and I'll press Return. Now all of the guides that I have on my artboard are exactly where they need to be. Well, in addition to creating vertical and horizontal guides, we can do other things with guides as well. So I'm going to select all of these guides and delete them. And then let's make one guide right here, sort of in the center of the artboard, and I'll come over to the Properties panel, and I'm going to click on the horizontal align center and the vertical align center because I want to rotate this guide, and I want the rotate ball right in the very center of the guide. They appear to just go on forever, but actually this guide's 227 inches tall, and if I don't center it, then my rotate ball could end up being way off of my artboard, and I'd rotate the guide completely out of sight. So with it centered, I'm going to get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, and sure enough, here's the rotate ball. And I can grab hold of this guide just like I would if I was going to rotate a line segment. I can treat it exactly the same. You can see the little text box next to my cursor, which tells me what the rotation level is. And when I get the angle where I want it, I can just release my mouse. Now undo that move, keyboard shortcut Command Z, and show you a couple of other things that you can do as you rotate. You can hold the Shift key down as you drag, and your guide is going to snap at each one of the 45-degree increments, and when you have it where you want it, you can just release your mouse and the guide is set. I'll undo that, keyboard shortcut Command Z, and sometimes you may want to actually make a copy as you rotate, so I'm going to go ahead and come back down here and hold down the Option key to make a copy and hold the Shift key down so that I drag in an increment of 45 degrees. And then with this guide selected and I've released my mouse, I'm going to duplicate that move using the keyboard shortcut Command D and Command D. And that may be a really useful set of guides for me for some of my projects. Now I'm going to select all of these by pressing Command A, and then I'm going to delete these, and I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to create a vertical guide at the 1-inch mark. And let's come over and change this X value to 1 and press the Return key. And now I want to quickly set up some guides that are 1 inch apart and have them go all the way across my artboard. Well, I have my first guide selected, and I know that because it's navy blue rather than the cyan, which is the default color. If I click on the artboard to deselect it, here you see that cyan color. So when you see a guide and it's a different color than the guide color, you know it's selected. All right, I'm going to come up to Object, Transform, Move, and I want a horizontal move of 1 inch. I don't want a vertical move, and I'm going to leave these other settings alone, and I'm going to press Copy. Then with that second guide still selected, I'm going to duplicate that move, keyboard shortcut Command D, and I'm going to keep pressing Command D until I have my guides all the way across my page. Then I can even select the guides, I can group the guides, and I can rotate the group by getting the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, and I'm going to press the Option key down and make a copy so I end up with a complete grid. That's really fast, and it can be useful based upon what your project needs are. But you might find it interesting that not all guides come from the rulers. We can actually turn any vector object that's on our artboard into a guide. This little line drawing is a vector object, and I can come up to View, down to Guides, and I can choose Make Guides, and look what's happened. This has turned into a guide. Now I also can use the keyboard shortcut Command 5, which is probably what I would do because that's one of the keyboard shortcuts that I've committed to memory. Now if I change my mind and I want to revert this back to the vector object, all I have to do is select it and use the keyboard shortcut Option Command 5, and right away I have my vector object back. Now I can do do the same thing by coming back up to View, down to Guides, and Release Guides would be what I would have chosen. It's grayed out now because I don't have any guides on the artboard. Now we can use any of the tools on the toolbar here, the rectangle, all of these except for the flare tool are vector objects and can be turned into guides. But you might also use the tools that are behind this line segment tool, such as the spiral tool, the rectangular grid tool, or the polar grid tool. I've set up some samples to just give you an idea of some of the different kinds of guides that you can create from either the objects or from these tools that are here behind the line segment tool. So depending on what you're working on, you can really customize a lot of different guides to fit your needs. Now, the one thing I encourage you to get in the habit of doing is keeping your guides organized and separate from your artwork. Let's move over to a different document and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to come to the Layers panel, and if you've watched many of my videos, you know that I like to organize my work in layers. Here I have my guides in their own layer. I can click on the little eyeball and quickly turn those off to see the newsletter without the guides. I can turn these back on. My heading is on its own layer, the text is on one, and then the little placeholder for my photo is also in its own layer. Now, having your guides together so that you can get to them quickly is going to be helpful for a couple of other reasons, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But let's first come to the Properties panel and talk about how we can show or hide our guides. With nothing selected on the artboard, I can come over to the Guides area. Right now, my guides are turned on, but if I click on this little icon here, they're immediately turned off. Let's turn them back on, and I'm going to select this text, and you notice that when anything is selected on the artboard, I don't have access to those icons anymore. Well, I can either come up to View and down to Guides, and I can hide or show the guides here, and the keyboard shortcut is Command semicolon, but it's just as easy to click off of the artboard to deselect everything. Then I do have access to the icons, and I can turn the guides off and I can turn them back on. The only problem is I have to turn them all on or all off. And the same thing is true for locking and unlocking my guides. I can click on this second icon, and this is going to lock the guides so that I can't select them and I can't accidentally move them. I can do the same thing by coming up to View and down to Guides. And I can lock and unlock the guides here. I can also use the keyboard shortcut option, Command semicolon. But if I wanted to just lock some of the guides and not all of the guides, I'm out of luck using this process. I'm going to unlock these because I do want to show you one other thing. Let's say we wanted to delete the guides altogether. Now, if all I'm doing is printing my project, I don't have to worry about guides. I can hide them, but they're not going to print. So that's not going to be a concern. But if I want to delete them for other reasons, I can go up to View, down to Guides, and choose Clear Guides. Now, I'm not going to press this because it will delete all of my guides even if I have them locked somewhere else. But there are a couple of other ways that you can delete your guides. If you just have a few, then you can simply select them and press the delete key. But if they're intermingled with your artwork and you try to do that, you're likely to delete some of your artwork as well. Well, now let's go back to the Layers panel, and let me twirl this guide layer open, and we have sub-layers under here. Now you can see that I have these top 3 horizontal guides selected. These little blue squares here are showing me which one of the guides are selected. So if I wanted to hide them and not hide the rest of the guides, I come over to the eyeballs on their layer and I simply click, and now they're hidden. So with the Layers panel, I can hide some but not all of the layers where I can't do that anywhere else. Now, if I want to lock some of the margins but not the others, I can select these again, and we know which layers they are, and I click in the column next to the eyeball, This is going to lock just these layers and not the other ones. And then to unlock them, all I do is come back and click on the lock and they're unlocked. And then finally, if I want to delete some but not all, I select them by clicking on this little target ball, and if I want to select more than one, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and that allows me to select more than one, and I'm going to press the delete key, and they're gone. I still have the other guides that I wanted to keep. Now I'm going to undo that move, keyboard shortcut Command Z, because I didn't actually want to delete my guides. Now, to maximize the usefulness of your guides, there are a couple of settings that you need to take into account. The first one is that your snap options need to be turned off, especially the snap to grid. And we want our smart guides turned on. This is the third icon in the guides, and smart guides aren't really guides, they're just a help to our guides. Now let's see how this works. I'm going to select this rectangle and delete it, and I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M. As I hover over the intersection of the two guides, the Smart Guides tells me I'm there, and as I come to another guide, I get a pop-up with that message as well. And with these little messages of the guides and the intersections, Smart Guides helps me be very precise with my placement. Whether you're working with guides or not, I always recommend leaving Smart Guides turned on. Well, I've gone to the trouble of creating this 2-column publication design, and it would sure be nice if I didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time I needed to make a 2-column newsletter. I can turn all of these guides into a template, and I can save it in one of two ways. First of all, if this was a newsletter that I just had finished working on for real, I need to make sure that I make a copy of it as an Illustrator file before I make a template. But now let's talk about the two ways that I can save this template. I can save it with the text placeholders so that each time I come in and use the template, the formatting is already set up for me. And let's do that first. So I'm going to come up to File and Save As, and I'm going to give this a name, 2-column template with placeholder. Now make sure as you give your template a name that your description is complete enough. You don't have to go through several templates before you find the one that you want. I personally don't put my templates in Illustrator's template folder because I don't want to run the risk of losing my templates if I end up having to reinstall Illustrator. So I've created my own folder, and I've made sure to put it in a place where I'm not going to forget where it is, because after all, it may be a year from now before I need this 2-column template again. Now, I know that the folder is on my desktop right now. You can put it either in your desktop or in your documents. So when I find it, I'm going to double click on it, and that's going to open it up. And this is where Illustrator is going to save my new template. But look at the extension here. This is an AI file, which is an Adobe Illustrator file, and we don't want that for the template. So I've got to come down to the bottom, and here in the format area, I'm going to click on the little pull down menu, and I'm going to choose Illustrator template, which is an AIT file. And after I've chosen that, then all I have to do is click Save, and now the new name for the document has an AIT extension. Well, I'm going to close this document out, and then let's go back and I'll show you how to find it. I'm going to come up to File, and instead of New, I'm going to choose New from Template. And when I do, Illustrator is going to take me directly to their template folders. Now I know my templates aren't in there. That's why it's so important to remember where they are. My template folder is on my desktop, so I'm going to click Desktop, and I know what the name is, so it's going to be easiest for me to just click on Name to alphabetize everything. Let's come down here, and we're looking for Susan's Illustrator templates. I'll double click here, and here I have my 2-column template with placeholder. So I'm going to click here and choose New. Now we're ready to start anew, but I can also save this without the text. So I'm going to go back to the Illustrator file, open recent files, and here's my Illustrator version of that. And I'll come to the Layers panel, I'm going to click the photo layer and press the delete key. I'm going to click on the text and press the delete key, and I'll click on heading and press the delete key. Now all I have left are the guides in my guide layer. So now I can come back and save this as a template as well. So we'll come up to File, Save As, and we have the name 2-column template, and I'm going to add in here without text. Then I want this to go to my template folder. So I've got to navigate down to that. I'm going to click on name again so I can go right to the S's and double click on Illustrator templates. Then I'll be sure and save this as a template folder and come back over here and choose save. So now we have a 2-column template without text. Now that's really pretty easy, especially when we had all of these extra items in the layers panel. And that's just one more reason why organizing your project into layers is a good idea. Well, this is all I'm going to cover in this video about using guides in Adobe Illustrator, but I will have some specific tutorials dealing with different templates which I've created, and you might want to check that out next. So be sure and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of those future tutorials, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.